All right. So, yeah, thank you everybody for letting me discuss about Innovation Group and Safety Management Driver Safety Group is a global company.
Hello, Paul. Paul, there is a problem. There is an issue with your connection. Ladies and gentlemen, sorry for this inconvenience. We are trying to connect again with Paul.
All right, you're back. Okay, can you hear me all right?
Yes, now we can hear you.
Yep, okay, seems to have dropped out. If we can just go to the next slide.
Will do.
Okay, the issue we have, incident rates, as we all know, are roughly 20% across fleet. So that's 1 in every 5 vehicle is involved in an accident every year. 94% of those accidents are a direct result of driver error. Nothing to do with the car, nothing to do with the road, etc. It's totally driver error. So the average cost of loss relating to vehicle accidents is almost twice the average workplace injury. In fact, the insurance companies themselves say that the cost of an accident is 6 times the cost of the actual repair. So there's a role of the boards with ever increasing health and safety. There's a specific role of boards, the executives and fleet managers in managing the risk. If they don't, there is harsh penalties for non-compliance, which I'm sure is in most regions now. Some of those penalties, as you're probably aware in Europe, is corporate manslaughter. In other areas, it is very heavy fines. So any identified risk must be acted upon. So there's a need for all fleets to instigate and maintain an active fleet management program in line with the legislation in each of your regions. So compliance can only be achieved by ongoing measuring, reporting, and reducing the risk that's been identified. Okay, there's also a need for accurate capturing and timely reporting via specialised systems. It's the only way you can manage this. I must stress it's not a one-off exercise. So it's not about sending drivers on a defensive driving course and hope that that's going to be it. It's an ongoing measurement and reduction of identified risks. So business culture can encourage bad behaviours, such as time pressures on delivery. So if you've got drivers out there that are couriers, need to deliver parcels on time, there's huge pressure on them to speed and get to those deliveries as fast as possible. So we need to be mindful that the culture can play a part in increasing the risk. Okay, so I want to point out adoption of safer vehicles alone does not address the issue of driver behaviour. Safer vehicles can actually encourage bad behaviour by making the drivers lazy because they become so reliant on those features. And if I use ABS as an example, that little image on the top there, ABS, the drivers seem to think that it will stop the vehicle faster, but as we all know, it just helps you steer that vehicle when you're heavy braking to try and avoid what you're going to hit. Next slide. Okay, so the issue continued. So driver risk management is a complex picture. It's about a whole heap of data coming from interconnected sources, okay, layered together to create a total picture of risk. Defensive driving, as I mentioned, alone is one way some companies try to address the risk. It's useful for when a driver lacks the skill to drive, but it's about stopping or trying to avoid your drivers getting into those dangerous situations in the first place. So how to change their behaviours and stop them getting into those risky situations. If they have done a defensive driving course, what they've learnt, they'll have 1 second to apply if they get into one of those situations. And by that time, they've either hit what they're trying to avoid or they've forgotten what that training is all about. Okay, telematics is also great, but unfortunately it's very vehicle specific and doesn't address multiple drivers. So if you've got multiple drivers stepping into a vehicle, individual vehicle, it's recording the data for the vehicle, not the driver. And unfortunately, there's volumes and volumes of data that can be collected by telematics these days. If we talk about OE connected vehicles, It's valuable as well, but once again, it's collecting data on the vehicle, and there's only some of the elements of risk. So what do you do with it? Okay, so what I want to talk about today is about driver attitudes and behaviours. I just want to say that when we all got our driver's licence, we proved we had the skill to drive. It was when the examiner got out of the vehicle that we developed our own attitudes and behaviours in how we drive. It's those attitudes and behaviours that cause us to take risk, and it's that risk that gets us into incidents. Okay, the other thing that I want to point out is emotion. If you've had a bad day at work, you'll take it out on the car going home. So it's important to recognise how you're feeling and drive appropriately. Okay, don't take it out on the car. Right, so last thing I want to talk is about, if you can change slide. Okay, the benefits of risk management. So first of all, it will establish executive leadership commitment to safety as a priority. So in other words, under duty of care, it's showing a commitment from the executive and the leadership team. It will reduce crashes, it will reduce injuries, it will reduce licence violations like speeding, etc. And it will also improve total cost of ownership. Okay, it provides immediate benefit to the bottom line, of course, by each one of these being reduced. The other benefit, side benefit with all this is a lot of the insurance companies today, if you're addressing the risk of your fleet, reducing the number of claims, then there's a saving to be made on insurance premiums. Okay, so most of those insurers are offering a discount. The idea of risk management is identifying individual drivers' attitudes and behaviours leading to targeted risk mitigation. And as I mentioned before, it's ongoing measurement and mitigation. You can't just do a one-off hit. It'll demonstrate duty of care, as I mentioned before. It will help you meet your corporate compliance requirements, applicable to each legislation in each of the jurisdictions. It'll also meet corporate social responsibility and protect your brand. Every time one of your company vehicles or a fleet vehicle is involved in an accident, that brand is at risk. It will also deliver a powerful message from the leadership team because they're helping their employees arrive home safely to their families each and every evening. That's what the whole objective of fleet risk management is all about. Okay, next slide. Okay, so risk reduction redefined. You'll see on the screen a picture of a mobile. Innovation Group itself is utilising a system called Mentor by a company called eDriving. I want to introduce this because it's one way we look at reducing our own risk. Okay, so it's an award-winning digital global driver risk management. It's won several awards around the globe. It's a unique smartphone-based solution. Combines patented continuous improvement methodology for driver risk reduction. And I'll show you how that works shortly. It facilitates proactive risk management, so we're not waiting for accidents to happen to do something about it. It's helping those drivers stop getting into those situations. Okay. And once we identify the high-risk drivers on the system, it will allocate coaching modules to actually address the actual risk of that driver. Okay, what's been identified as the high risk for that driver. It also facilitates one-on-one coaching with their immediate manager to talk about and how they can reduce the risk further, to identify and talk about how it can be. So it has buy-in from the immediate managers as well. It's a proven behavioural change techniques with the micro-learning and gamification built into it. And the gamification is important because it creates a competition between drivers. So each driver wants to beat the other driver. Becomes a very valuable tool. Okay, so it's got meaningful management information system sitting behind it, so the management can see what the driver scores are. It can't see where they've been, although the driver can. And it just shows what the driver is actually doing, and I'll go through a little bit more on that in a second. It benchmarks as well, so benchmark driver against driver, division against division, team against team, and can also benchmark companies within the same industry without identifying who the other companies are. Okay. Integrates other existing telematics as well. So if there's already telematics incorporated in the vehicle, so we can look at seatbelt use, we can look at idling time, etc. Can also be fed into the system, and through, depending on what universe has got, it can be integrated as well. So all the data can be stored in the one system, and it'll achieve an unparalleled view of the total fleet risk across an organisation. All right, next slide. Okay, so it's all about technology to support safety management. So Mentor, as I mentioned, is a groundbreaking approach to fleet safety using a smartphone, a simple smartphone. So there's no hardware required. This is the type of technology that's out there today. It's a unique smartphone app, identifies risky driving behaviour, has measurement of the driver and not the vehicle, so it transfers with the driver from vehicle to vehicle if they happen to use different vehicles. It's use of the smartphone sensors to collect and analyse driver behaviours, more predictive of risk. So what it does is measure acceleration, braking, cornering, speeding, and even uniquely phone distraction. So if that driver happens to take a phone call while they're driving, make a phone call while they're driving, or even text, the system actually records it, picks it up and records it as a incident that's happened during that trip. Okay. The driver receives a live safe driving score validated to predict the likelihood of that driver being involved in a crash or incident. And it's that driving score and those items that it's identified that needs to be addressed in the training. So it provides in-app training, so it's on the mobile itself, with engaging interactive micro-training modules. Okay, provides managers coaching templates to help coach their at-risk drivers to safer behaviour behind the wheel. So in that one-to-one meeting they can have with the driver, the system provides the data and the questions that they need to ask the driver and what commitment to get from the driver. It also provides the gamification that I mentioned, which promotes friendly competition amongst drivers. And that is really works within organisations. Next slide. Okay, so let's talk about the ROI, or the return of investment of a safety management program. So there's many global organisations using driver risk management effectively, such as the one I've mentioned, in achieving ROI returns of over 100%. Accident rates are proven to have reduced by up to 67%, and there's significant reductions to insurance premiums, which can be achieved as well. So what does it mean for the fleet manager, the clients of the FMOs, etc.? It pays for itself and it improves the bottom line. Now, there's several case studies that we can provide that demonstrate that this is achievable. So if we just go look at the bottom there, it's got 24,000 average cost of collision. I mentioned that the insurance industry have the data to confirm that the cost of an accident is actually 6 times the cost of the actual repair. So the average cost of repair being 4,000, then the actual cost of that collision is 24,000. And the reason being, you've got the cost of the physical damage, you've got injuries and lost days at work, you've got lost sales if they don't meet a sales commitment, external liability claims, and the wear and tear that could happen to that vehicle. Okay. The improvements that the system provides is your brand and public perception. So I talked about the corporate social responsibility, the driver well-being, because your duty of care is to make sure they arrive home safely all the time. The drivers feel well loved. The fuel consumption actually improves because they realise they're being monitored for speeding and harsh braking, harsh cornering, etc., which has a direct result on the fuel consumption on the vehicle. And of course, vehicle residual values or resale value of the car is protected as well because the car is in better condition. Next slide. Okay, so tips for fleet and industry players. It's important to identify the reasons for a fleet safety program. Societal, as I mentioned before, the corporate image that's projected out there, the brand. So your drivers, if you're involved in an accident, it's generally with a member of the public. So it's not a good image for your company or the brand. The business itself, so you want to make sure they do get to those sales meetings, they do make that delivery, etc., because otherwise there's a cost of the business. There's obviously a legal cost. If you're not meeting the compliance, or worse, an incident occurs where someone's injured or worse killed, then there's massive penalties could apply. And look at cost, the cost of not doing it, okay, based on those penalties. So measurement and mitigation must be an ongoing function. It's not a one-off hit. Proactive measures are more effective than reactive. So the last thing you want to do is someone's been involved in an accident, it's too late. The potential for injury or death has already occurred. So we want to be there, and you want to be there to be proactive to stop them getting into those situations in the first place. And last and not least, don't forget about the grey fleet. Most companies don't think that if the driver's driving their own vehicle, they're not responsible. They're 100% caught and under the company's policy. So if they're driving on behalf of your company, whether it's their own car, whether you're paying a car allowance, etc., it could be a novated lease that you get in Australia, they are still caught under the work safety legislation. Okay, next slide. So looking to the future, this is what's available today. There's obviously going to be a lot more happening in the future. Telematics, etc., grows very rapidly, as you know. And there's been massive changes, as we all know, due to COVID-19. So looking ahead, digitalisation presents incredible opportunities for safety and risk managers to move away from disparate manual tasks. No need to do this manually anymore, and providing with a single source of truth that helps to maintain the focus on safety as a strategic imperative. So thank you. That's the end of my presentation. The contact details are there if anybody would like to discuss anything further in the future.